Every day, thousands of people are ordered by the courts to attend anger management programs. Why is this done, and what exactly is supposed to be achieved? Today on Family Matters, anger management. If you visit a criminal or family court, you might be surprised at how many people get sent to anger management programs. Why is anger such a widespread problem? What do they do at anger management programs, and do they work? That's the topic of our discussion today. Our first guest is California lawyer Matthew Krupnick. Matthew, thanks for being on the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
What kind of situations arise where courts order people to go to anger management programs?
There's a multitude of situations. Obviously, anytime there is physical violence, you can rest assured the courts are going to take that very seriously and order some sort of anger management, or a higher level, some sort of jail time or prison time.
Or maybe both.
Or maybe both. And
so that's the criminal courts.
That's the,
if you've committed an act of violence, an assault or worse.
And God forbid it's on one of the children, it takes it to an even higher level. I mean, or more serious. Where you
and
can
justifiably.
Justifiably, you can rest assured there's probably going to be jail time.
And what about family courts? Have you had cases where your clients have been sent to anger management programs?
Yes, both ways, my client and the other client.
So what happens at these programs? What do they do there?
Well, it's similar in a sense to an AA program, for example. They have either group sessions where you'll get together and you'll all talk, express your feelings, try to have a feel-good session and air all the emotions out, get it out in group session. Then they have some intensive one-on-one therapy sessions, psychiatrist, psychologist, or a therapist. It really depends on the nature of what you did to get you there.
Well, who decides what kind of program you get sent to? Does the judge do it?
The judge.
All right, and now that may differ from jurisdiction to jurisdiction, because where I preside, the court just orders the person to go to anger management, and it's not the judge's choice as to what kind of programs they go to. So let's say that you're going to an individual anger management program. Why would that be chosen over a group therapy session?
To be honest, the people that are going to these programs generally are insecure. I mean, if you think about the reasons why someone is physically abusive to a child, to a woman to a man, woman to a woman, whatever the case may be, it usually stems from insecurity and issues like that.
Right.
So the notion of a group session with someone who's insecure and feeling the need to be macho or anything like that is going to make them less inclined to open up and really get to the root of the problem, as opposed to an individual session where it's confidential and private. Some improvement.
And the group thing I never kind of got that anyway. Why would you put a bunch of angry people together, many of whom probably don't want to be there, and expect that somehow there's going to be something therapeutic out of that? What am I missing out of that?
You're missing nothing, and I don't mean to take it lightly when I smile, because I just think it is sometimes a silly notion to...
Do you think these programs work?
You read my mind. I was going to take it a step further. If they're voluntary, I think they can work, absolutely. If a
person wants to go? Is that what you mean by voluntary?
Yes.
So they recognize that they've got a problem and they want to go and get help.
Exactly.
But most of these people are ordered by the judge to do it.
Exactly, in which case I think it's almost always a waste of time. If you're the type of person that would take your hand to your spouse, ex-spouse, child, the thought of 8 weeks sitting in group therapy going to cure you is a silly thought.
Why do you think then that the courts keep ordering it? I mean, what else are we supposed to do for these people who have problems with impulse control, and managing their temper. What else do we know of that might work better?
Jail.
But jail, isn't that a place where you just get more angry? Yeah. You're just throwing a bunch of dysfunctional people together and expecting them to come out rehabilitated?
That's what we talked about doing it in the group therapy. But in jail, I suspect that the type of people that are in anger management are not your typical hardened criminals. These are people that just are insecure and lose control. A lot of time alcohol, drugs are involved. They're not the type of people that are used to being in jail, and it probably wouldn't take more than a visit or two there to make them never want to go back.
So you're saying that a short, sharp period of incarceration might actually be much more therapeutic and have a deterrent factor that would be much stronger than going to an 8-week anger management program?
Absolutely, and especially the deterrent factor. And when there's a child involved, I think it should almost be mandatory.
What do your clients tell you after they've gone to an anger management program? Are they telling you it's a waste of time?
Yeah, without getting into any specifics, some of them have laughed about it, like that it was silly. Not that what they did was silly, but that the class was silly.
And they got nothing out of it.
They got nothing out of it.
It's very discouraging as a judge because we aren't really given a whole lot of tools in our toolbox to use as a sentencing mechanism. Or even in family court, you're not sentencing someone, but you are trying to get them to develop insight into the consequences of their behavior, right? There aren't a lot of tools we have.
Well, if the worst consequence is going to an anger management class, we have a problem in that department.
Well, there you have it. I think that's a very honest approach. I suspect that a lot of people share that view. And so I thank you for expressing it. Thank you very much for being on the show. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we'll meet social worker Anthony Hutchinson. Stay with us. Welcome back to our discussion of anger management. I'm pleased to welcome our next guest, Dr. Anthony Hutchinson. Anthony, you are a social worker who actually runs anger management programs, correct?
Yes, we do.
Well, I don't want to put you on the spot, but a lot of people say those programs don't do a thing. That anger is so entrenched, that kind of behavior, that there's no way that in an 8-week program, a person can come out of it with really any benefit. What do you say?
There is no cookie-cutter approach to dealing anger issues with any person. And we're dealing with voluntary versus involuntary clients. Again, there's other complexities. But what we have to understand is we're dealing with an individual, and what any anger management therapist needs to do is be able to effectively look at the ABC of anger management.
Well, what is the ABC of anger management?
Looking at the affect, which is the emotional component, the B, which is behavior, and the C, which is the cognition. And there is a propensity to medicalize or clinicize anger, and that's what a lot of anger management intervention programs are about. And so one of the things we're really always looking at the issue of behavior, because generally speaking, why people end up in anger management is because they've exhibited a behavior that's seen as dysfunctional and harmful to society. But the other elements, the emotional component basically becomes how do people manage their emotions, or how do they respond to them effectively? And then the cognition could be, well, do you think it's okay to be violent or hit another person? And that becomes a lot more complex and convoluted to address with people. So how the anger management programs are implemented is very, very important. How responsive the individual is important, and then who the therapist is important. And when you have those mixes of factors, it becomes a very difficult intervention from a kind of a cookie-cutter approach, if you will. And so not one size always fits all.
Well, do you have a way of measuring the success of these programs? Because if most of the people that come to you were ordered to, not because they want to,
Yes.
what's the chances that there's going to be success?
Well, we know that when it comes to problems in people's lives, the most important way of getting to a solution, or they say the solution, you're halfway there when you acknowledge the problem. So if an individual goes in for anger management and they feel that they don't have a problem to begin with, the likelihood is they can do 8 or 12 sessions and they could still come out without ever admitting that they had a problem in the first place. So that's where we really have to look at, is the problem being effectively defined with the individual? I do both group and individual sessions. I find when I do one-on-one therapy with anger management, I tend to be more effective because I get to know right off the bat and explore. You're an involuntary client. Do you feel you have a problem, yes or no?
But what if they say no? I was sent here by the judge.
Absolutely.
I pleaded guilty because it was the most expedient thing to do.
Yes.
But between you and me, I don't think I did anything wrong. And this is a waste of time. What are you going to do with a person like that?
Because and at that point, you've identified the C of anger management, the cognitive component. Because if we don't get into the cognition component, the A or the affect or the emotional, and the B, the behavior, we're not going to make any difference. So then it becomes about immediately exploring what the attitudes are, what the cognitions are of the individual that you're doing the therapy with, and how do we explore that to figure out why they feel it's okay for them to engage in inappropriate anger behavior or emotion.
So how long would it take to reach a person, let's say they're in their 30s,
Yes.
and they have used anger and allowed it to manifest itself with antisocial behavior all their lives?
Yes.
How long is this therapy going to last before the person says, hey, I've got to find a better way to manage my impulse control?
I've been very effective using what's called brief focused solution-based therapy.
Brief focused
Yes.
solution-based therapy.
Yes, and what I do with that is I identify where they are in terms of their cognition immediately, and then sometimes we call it cognitive behavioral therapy, cognitive behavioral approach as well. So I use a hybrid of those different modalities to pinpoint where the cognition is with the individual, and then work to quickly try to adjust their emotional response and their behavioral responses. Now, even if they are effective in being successful by saying they're not going to perhaps reoffend or they're going to please the court upon their next appearance, there is a level of attrition that may occur that once they've now satisfied the court requirements and moved on with their lives, they may in fact relapse. And that would need to be assessed at a later date, which unfortunately manifests itself as repeat offense.
Do you have statistics about how many people who've taken anger management get themselves convicted again for being violent?
Because offenses could happen across different jurisdictions, and they might happen across different courts. Those statistics are very difficult. The authorities have statistics to that degree, but what happens is because of privacy issues, it's very difficult to get particulars of cases and follow cases from statistical gathering perspectives on individuals.
Do you think that anger management is something that should be taught much sooner? Managing
Yes.
your emotions, impulse control, learning how to channel your anger into something more positive, much earlier in one's education?
Once a person gets to the point where they lose it in terms of impulse, lack of impulse control and anger exhibition, it generally is because they haven't learned how to deal with problem management or how to deal with stress very effectively. But remember, in our society, we tend to glorify anger. When we look at sports, when we look at hockey games, people cheer at hockey games when there's a fight. So remember, anger becomes a function of what our society is. And so when we see people acting inappropriately, what we should be doing is in fact teaching perhaps in the sports arenas or on the sports fields across our nation, how do we deal with problem solving in an effective manner right from the time children are young. Again, you look at things like bullying. We should be addressing these things from the time that they're below 6, because by the time they get to be older, it gets to be too late.
I agree with you, and I'm glad that you said that because I think a lot of people watching will agree with you. Thank you, Dr. Hutchinson, for being on the show.
It's been a pleasure.
When we come back, we will go in chambers with psychologist Erwin Butkowski. Stay with us. Welcome back. We're in chambers with my next guest, Dr. Erwin Butkowski, a psychologist with over 30 years experience. Welcome to Family Matters, Dr. Butkowski.
Thank you.
I want to ask you about the fact that anger seems to be so prevalent in our society today. Everything from road rage to people having trouble at work. Is it more prevalent than it used to be?
No, I don't think so. Actually, respectfully, I think your question's a bit of a trick question. In as much as I think all of us experience anger probably several times every day of our lives. And really, it's a question of what do we do with those feelings and how do we manifest them. Some people manifest anger in socially unacceptable or inappropriate or even violent ways. Some people express their anger in assertive and socially appropriate ways, and some people channel their anger into energy that allows them to accomplish many things in the course of their days. So I think anger is a very normal emotion for all of us to experience.
But so many people seem to be out of control. You know, I often say to people in court that are acting out very badly, well, if this is your best behavior, if this is what is supposed to be your best behavior, how do you treat other people? You know, so I understand anger can be, if you channel it correctly, you can really drive success. But so many people seem to be triggered. There seems to be a layer of volatility beneath so many people. You see it in the checkout line at the grocery store. You certainly see it on the roads. I don't remember seeing this when I was growing up.
Well, I don't know if we've seen an increase, and if there is an increase, I think it's probably the result of an interaction of personality characteristics, day-to-day frustrations, and the higher levels of stress in our society that are a function of economic hardships and an increasing number of things in our lives that we feel helpless to control. And anger is a very normal reaction when we feel helpless.
Now, you work primarily with parents in conflict. And I am sure you see, as often as I do, people that go to anger management counseling. Is there a good candidate for anger management counseling? You know, what kind of person would most benefit?
Well, I think the answer is the same answer as, you know, what kind of people benefit from psychological treatments of any kind. And that's typically someone who has some capacity to reflect on their own actions, take responsibility for their contribution to events, understand the impact that their behavior has on others, and who feels conflicted about the behavior that they're engaged in. They want help, they're motivated. Those are the kind of people who benefit.
So what about the people that get ordered to go to an anger management program because the court said so as part of a criminal court case or family court case? If they don't have any real insight into their problem, is it going to work?
I think it's far less likely. I think most of those people are going through the motions. They're participating in the course in order to get that piece of paper that says that they attended. It never says they passed, it just says they attended.
Well, there isn't a test, from what I understand, to pass.
Well, no, there isn't, and I guess we'd have to provoke people and see how they react to know whether they'd benefited from the program.
That would be one way to know.
Yeah, that'd be one way to know. But
I could push their buttons in court and see whether they explode.
You could try.
It just seems to me, you know, and even if they are motivated, these are usually 8-week programs. They go once a week for a couple hours. Is that enough in a group setting to undo something that must have been learned behavior that's entrenched within them their whole lives?
Well, probably the best answer to that question is these kinds of programs are going to help some of the people some of the time. And it's probably a minority. Most of these programs are structured. They're group programs. They're time limited. They're primarily based on cognitive behavioral intervention models, which really have their basis in the notion that if we change the way people think, it can change the way that they behave. So people can learn some things, and in some circumstances, perhaps when stress levels are low, they may be able to avail themselves of what they learned. But I think when we're dealing with such time-limited interventions that really don't delve into the characterological basis of the anger and the history of that anger and the circumstances.
Which you'd have to do individually, right? Not in a group.
Well, you can
To
do
really
it
get
in
into
both,
that.
but I think you need a lot longer time than that, and you need the opportunity. And most of these programs are very structured and they're more educational in their focus.
They're really about education. And well, talking about education, do you think children should be taught anger management mechanisms early in school?
Well, you know, one of the failures of our education system is the failure to teach basic social and life skills. We spend a lot of time classically teaching reading, writing, and arithmetic, and for whatever reason, we've decided that we should leave the training of children in anger management, social skill development, basic life skills to parents, and who are not themselves all that good at it all the time. So we have seen a recent influence in schools to teach character development and teaching how to control emotions, how to express them in socially appropriate ways is a part of character development, and I'd certainly like to see a lot more of that. I think as a society, we have a responsibility to teach our children that and teach it in a quality way because those skills are going to be more adaptive in the long term than addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division.
And if life has become more stressful, as you pointed out earlier, it seems to me that it's more important than ever that kids learn some ability to channel that anger into the ways that you mentioned earlier so that they can use it as a motivator to achieve.
Well, I absolutely agree. In our society, we can get computers to do math. We can get computers to spell check our documents. But we need our education system to teach us basic life skills.
Well, I really appreciate your insights into a topic that I think a lot of people hear about but have never had the benefit of hearing from a psychologist what the mechanisms of anger management really are all about. Thank you so much for being on our show.
You're welcome.
Hello, I'm Lauren McLean. Today on Q&A, our question is, does our child have any say in our child custody case? Remember the old saying, children should be seen and not heard? Well, this adage doesn't apply in child custody cases anymore. New family law legislation and social science strongly supports hearing the views of children in family cases involving their best interests. Children now have a voice, but not the choice in child custody and access cases. Children have legal rights to be heard in all child custody and access cases. Obtaining full input from them, including younger ones, on the facts in dispute can lead to better decisions for children that lead to better outcomes for them. Receiving children's input early on in the process and throughout may reduce the intensity and duration of the conflict between the parents. The maturity and intelligence of the child is important to how much weight is placed on their wishes, and whether they've been improperly influenced in expressing their wishes is also critical.
Thanks for watching. For extended interviews and exclusive content, please visit our website at familymatterstv.com. If you'd like to submit your legal question to our Q&A, go to advicescene.com. I'm Justice Harvey Brownstone. See you next time.